Yes, ma'am. You can start.
Okay, there you go. Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's Saturday, uh, but yes, let us keep our flow continued. Okay, I know as per the communication you received, you were expecting Dr. Amit to be there, but unfortunately, he hasn't been keeping well. Let us wish him speedy recovery. And chalo, take a deep dive into today's session, which is important and little difficult. Okay, so let me give you two disclaimer beforehand. The first and foremost, which each and every facilitator tells you about, that this is a facilitation session and it's not uh, a lecture. First thing, and before coming to this facilitation session, this was expected out of you to visit the platform, the canvas, and go through the sessions given and whatever material given related to today's topic. Okay, that was the disclaimer number one. Disclaimer number two is, one thing you need to understand that this session is for the educational person, for your and mine understanding purpose. Hence, some points we may come across which may or may not be the part of current program, AIDS control program. So let us not get into the program theme and understand also it uh, as an education. Are you all with me? Considering yes? Okay, so let us start. So today's session is about antiretrovirals, adverse effects, interactions, and resistance. So allow me take a little liberty to start first with resistance, because this is the topic which many of us may not be aware of or find it difficult to understand. So that is why I think we should start with resistance, and so that we can spend maximum time in understanding and interpreting the results, and the remaining time we can spend on adverse effects and interactions. Right? Okay. So remember, today's session is going to be a little longer than uh, the schedule provided. Allow me to do so. Yeah. Okay. So Dr. David and Dr. Andrian, they have given an elaborate account of what adverse effects are, interactions are, and how to interpret resistance reports. So this has been elaborately discussed on those two lectures given on the canvas. Yes, as I said, we will start with the resistance part first. So first, understand what resistance is. We'll start with the goals of ART. We know why we give ART and what we look at. If you remember, in my previous session of introduction to ART, we had seen the different goals of ART. In that, we had seen the virological suppression, uh, immunological advancement, and clinical progress. So all these accounts we are supposed to monitor throughout the course of the ART. Okay, so goals of ART: ensure maximal and sustained viral suppression while maintaining the future therapeutic option for PLHIV. If you remember, in last session, we talked about the rational sequencing of the drugs. There we also had seen the first line therapy, and what if the first line therapy doesn't work or patient fails the first line therapy. In that, we talked about the second line and third line. Okay, so the consistent high level adherence to ART is the key. This is, I don't know how many times this point has been reiterated by various regulatory as well as the authorities which take care of HIV AIDS through the world. Okay, so that is why the most of our infrastructure and resources are directed towards making patient understand the importance of adherence. Okay, uh, two points I would want you guys to, understand and take it forward. First, okay, let me ask a question. First, if do you think that if someone is adherent to the ART 100%, that PLHIV uh, will not develop resistance ever? So this is the question we are going to deal. I think someone is there on the chat. Okay, I'll see the chat option. Okay, let me see.
Participants can now unmute themselves.
There can be primary resistance.
There can be primary resistance. So my question was, if a PLHIV is adherent, 100% adherent to the ART, so if I say that he will not develop resistance ever, he's responding, and I say that he will not develop resistance ever, true or false?
False.
False. The reason can be? Yes, you are right, ma'am. The reason can be?
Yeah, there can be that person might have acquired the virus which is already resistant.
Okay. Okay. I said, but he was responding already. Okay. I'll take you through this. This is a little tricky question. So let us understand it. Poor adherence to ART accelerates the development of drug resistance, which further causes progression of disease. Yes, we understand this. Adherence is of utmost importance, and if someone is not adherent to it, okay, there are two scenarios. Someone is extremely adherent, 100% for that matter, and the other one is poorly adherent to the treatment. So we will try to understand how these two different scenarios can cause resistance. Okay, but both of them can cause resistance even if you are 100% adherent to the therapy.
Okay.
Next. Okay. Okay, yes. This is the next slide. Yes. So, HIV reverse transcriptase is highly error prone enzyme. We all know this. Reverse transcriptase is the culprit most of the time. And this is the first one which actually shows the resistance first in the sequence. Okay, so now coming to the minute. Shweta, do you have any idea how can I shift this panel which is on the top of my laptop?
No, there's no panel. Only the PPT is visible.
No, but for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing is, maybe you can just stop sharing and share again. Try that.
Okay.
The screen is visible.
But that panel is still there. Okay. Okay. I'll figure out something.
You want me to share a screen from my side?
Can you do that?
Yeah, I can do that. Give me 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, the entire panel is taking almost 1/10 space of my top side of laptop. Okay, let me by then talk about, so what is the desired response when we talk about virological suppression? So in the graph given, we can see the HIV RNA, the copies number, and the weeks of therapy, weeks into therapy. Yes, yes. So if we start with, as we all aware that HIV is very smart RNA virus. I had given a detailed account of it when we were talking about introduction to ART. In that, we have seen that how fast it can replicate and it can produce billions of copies. Billions, okay? So billions is, I suppose, 10 is to power 3 millions. So million is 10 lakh. So these many copies are produced day in and day out. Next slide, Shweta. So yes, so while producing these many copies, so you can consider it as a factory which is producing n number of copies, some lakhs and crores of copies in a day, you can expect to have some kind of manufacturing defect in it. So there are few progenies or few viral copies which come out as a defect. We call it as errors, we call it as mistakes, and we call it as mutations. So there can be certain viral copies with mutation. So what mutation? If I take you back to our first year of MBBS and even 12th standard science, we know that mutation is change in a single gene sequence. So that is what we call it as mutation. So what is the desired response? Here in the graph, you can see that viral count is coming down. And in India, what we call it as when the viral count goes below 1000 copies per ml of blood, then we call it as suppressed. The PLHIV is virologically suppressed, but the desire is not detectable. Undetectable viral load is something what we work towards, right? So this is the typical response, which is not very common actually. So typical response wherein you can see that a sharp decline in the viral copies and ultimately going below 50 or detectable level. Okay. Now come to the next slide, Shweta. This is going to be interesting. Now see the kind of response. The person was responding well initially for a few weeks. The viral count went below the number 50 and then stayed there for, plateaued there for some time and then started going up. This is what we call it as virologic rebound. So where virus bounced back. Okay, why this happens, that we are going to see in the subsequent slides. The another type of response, next slide please. Yes, the another side of type of response is incomplete or virologic response. Here you can see that yes, initially the patient responded well. Gradually it came down to certain level, which is 200 here in this case, and then it started moving up. This is called as incomplete virologic response. Now there are two different schools of thoughts. Some authors or some schools might consider it as virologically suppressed because it is below the level of 1000. And some might consider it as a start of resistance. Okay, so now to coming to the first understanding where they are saying that it is suppressed and since it is less than 1000. Now their logic is, as you, I think you must be remembering that we have spoken about reservoirs for HIV in the body. There we talked about macrophages and other areas where, you know, the HIV virus can go and hide. So I had called it as hideouts for HIV viruses. So those reservoirs on and off can release those viruses. The reservoirs are the inaccessible areas. So where our drugs may not be able to reach. So from those reservoirs, they keep on releasing the viruses on and off. And because of that, the first school of thought, people belonging to that group, they think that the reservoirs are responsible, such kind of response wherein they keep on releasing the viruses from the reservoirs, but it is not in a quantity where they are actually crossing the milestone of 1000. Okay. So, and the other ones, they do not believe in this and they think that it is actually the start of resistance. Next slide, please. So we had seen the virological suppression where the response went below 50 and it was undetectable. Then we had seen that incomplete one and viral rebound. So in viral rebound, it is going below the level. It is being undetectable and then coming back, bouncing back. Incomplete response, we talked about two schools of thought. Now this is the crux of resistance lies in this slide. If you pay attention here, you would understand that how the resistance is developed. First, I'll make you understand the two terminologies which are used here, wild type HIV and the resistant type. So wild type is the one which we have studied the structure of and which is considered as the base, the basic one. So which are studied and the structure of which is known and which is found everywhere. So that is wild type or the original type. Okay. So the person is infected, and in Indian perspective, since most of the patients, ART naive patients, so they are infected with wild type of HIV virus. There are not many studies of it, but one of the studies done by NARI says that in India, 95% are the wild type HIV. That's a good news for us. Okay. And not the resistant. Madam just said some time back that person might be infected with resistant type of HIV. But here is the point that very few patients are primarily infected with resistant virus. But in India, most of them are wild type of HIV virus. And good news, this is the good news because our first line ART is going to work for them. Okay. So as I told you that billions of copies of viruses are produced day in and day out. So what happens if I come to the pre-treatment box? So there you can see all those, the brown dots, those are the wild type of HIV viruses. So they are producing and reproducing and creating billions of copies. And as I already mentioned, there could be some defects. There could be some mutations because of which you can see the two dots, which are the resistant type of viruses. So what does that mean, resistance, when I resistant, when I say that? Do you remember we talked about three types of enzymes in viral structure, the capsid, which comes inside the host cells, which is a CD4 T lymphocyte cell. And that capsid, it contains RNA, viral RNA, and which is a genome for virus, and three types of enzymes, the reverse transcriptase, integrase, and proteases. So these three types of enzymes are there, if you remember. So these are actually the, and all our ARTs are directed towards these three, targeting these three enzymes. So in a subsequent slides, we would also understand how exactly the resistance occurs. But for the purpose of this particular slide, please understand these three enzymes are responsible for generation of resistant copies. Okay, so here you have seen that brown dots are more in pre-treatment and resistant dots are very few. Understand. Now come to the initial response. When you start the patient who is predominantly is a wild virus infected, when you start the patient with first line therapy, then now you see that in box number 2, the green only 2 and resistant dot is 1. So question number 1, where have this brown dots gone? Question number 2, why the pink dot, which is a resistant virus, is 1, which was again 1 in the previous slide. Why has the number of pink dots not increased? And where has the green dot gone? Okay, so these 3 questions are there. I'll come to question number 1, which is the brown dots. So which was our wild virus. So our ART regimen, which we gave to the patient, was effective and drastically it brought down the viral copies. So that is why the brown dots, so which are actually the sensitive type of virus, they are brought down by the ART regimen. Okay, now why the pink dot has remained the same? Why hasn't it increased or decreased? Why hasn't it increased? Okay, I tell you. So what is the parent for your pink dot? The brown dot, right? Because while reproducing the viral copies, the parent is the brown dot, and which is ultimately giving rise to the resistant types. So those have decreased. So obviously, because of that, there is no increase in the pink dots. And why hasn't it decreased? Simple. The ART which you have given is not active against the pink dot, which is a resistant virus. Right. Now, what happened to the green dot? If your ART is not active against it, or your green dot is a resistant dot, what happened to that? See, whatever mutations are produced, whatever mutations happen, so that happens to very few copies, right? That happen to very few copies. And some copies may be responsive to the ART, and some are totally DHEAT, what we call it as, totally not responding to the ART. Got it? So that green dot was taken care of by your ART along with the brown dots, but your pink dot is the major resistant strain, which is not responding at all to ART. Now come to the third box. The patient was initially responding with the very good response we had seen initially. Now the person thinks that, okay, I'm feeling better, why to continue or adhere to the treatment? So the person starts missing the doses. Now see the picture, the third box. There you can see the number of pink dots are 4. So the DHEAT virus of yours, so which was a resistant completely, that resistant virus has increased now, because whatever brown dots were there, so they were giving rise to pink dots. I'll explain that with my analogy, but here you try to understand. So there is a pressure when the person was responding, the virus inside was responding to the ART therapy, there was certain amount of pressure created by your ART, under which your virus found it difficult to replicate and prosper. But when there is up and down in the pressure, sometimes pressure is high, sometimes person is adhering, sometimes person is not adhering. So this not adhering phase is very dangerous, in that virus is getting enough time, opportunities to make its strategies to, I had told you, right, at the start of my first session, that RNA viruses are one of the smartest fellows in the universe. So they strategize. They come up with a strategy wherein they know that pink dot is actually not responding. So let us uh, keep our species alive. This is what we call it as survival of the fittest, right? So species alive by producing more and more pink dots. So the pink dots are generated more. So whatever brown dots were there, which increased because of the adherence issues, those brown dots are now giving rise to pink dots. And in the process, because of the other defects, the other dots were also generated, the blue dots and the green dots. Okay, now the person continued his non-adherent behavior, And now you come to the box number 4. There you can see pink dots are more in number, and there are various other resistant types. Can you see? And number of brown dot is 1. Right? This is how the viruses respond. And this is the reason why the entire resources, infrastructure, majority of it is actually focusing towards the adherence part. Am I clear with this? Okay, now let me give you the, Shweta, next slide, please. Okay, so you can see here the fifth box being added. The 4 boxes are same. Now fifth box is about that person who was non-adherent now went on to discontinue the ART. And after some time, you see that the brown virus is blooming again. And the other dots are now less in number. Yes. So why did this happen? Let me tell you the story from the perspective of this virus. Come to the box number 1, where you see the brown viruses are actually the docile one, the docile viruses, the novice viruses, so which are not equipped, which are not the warrior types. So they are not very well equipped. They are not the fighters. Okay. So very few of them are the fighter types, which are green and yellow dots. So under attack, in initial therapy, I'm talking about, under attack, you see that the novice ones which were not ready to fight, they were killed. And the one which was actually the fighter in nature, the resistant one, which stayed there. Now come to the adherence problems, the box number 3 I'm talking about. The attack is now on and off type. Had it been continuous, then the number of even the fighter type of viruses would have decreased. But talking about that would not have decreased actually, because that would not have increased at least for certain time, because the parent virus, which was the brown dot, was going down. Okay, so now when the attack is on and off, you can see that the fighter ones, the pinks ones, are increasing in nature, increasing in their number, and also there are other fighters being created, right? So the docile ones, the novice ones, are now have taken back seats. Now on longer term, when you see when the attack is on and off, you can see the number of fighters growing increasingly, and the brown dots, which was the novice one, is limited to number 1, only number 1. Okay, now what happens? The attack is completely removed. When the attack completely goes out of the picture, the viruses which were the fighter one, and they again give rise to the wild ones, the original ones. So again, the virus count comes back to baseline, not normal, comes to the baseline, which is more of wild type, the novice types, non-fighter types. The reason, there is no attack now. So under attack, they become fighter. Okay, so under program, we do not do genotyping, or what we call it as drug sensitivity test. We do not do much. So that is why the NACO has given us a guidance wherein what to do if certain regimen fails, how to bring that patient on second line, and what happens or if the resistance occurs in second line, how to bring the patient to the third line. That also has been given under guidance. So everything has a basis. Everything has a reason to it that we will see gradually. But is it clear to you? Can you please type in text box if this fundamental is clear to you? What happens in pre-treatment? What happens in initial response? and what happens as a adherence problems and when patient is taken off ART. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, Divya, that's you. Okay. So, okay. Thank you, Susanna. Yes. Okay. Great. Yes. Next slide, please. Resistant testing. Let us talk about this. Next slide. So here I'm talking about the US scenario. This may not be relevant to. Thank you, Chitra. So this may not be relevant to our setup. So wherein we can see the clinical setting for ordering HIV drug resistant testing. So when to do drug resistant testing. So in case of acute HIV, I'm talking about US guys. Huh? Do not take it to heart. So entry into care, that is HIV care, regardless of timing of starting of ARV therapy, virological failure and HIV RNA when more than 1,000 copies, and a patient with suboptimal HIV RNA suppression, and all the pregnant women with HIV. So this is what is followed at US. Next slide, please. Okay, let us now try to understand how this genotyping is done. Blood sample is taken, and from the blood sample the plasma is separated, and from plasma HIV virus, the particle of HIV is separated. So the particles are separated and they undergo extraction. The RNA is separated, and in the laboratory with the help of reverse transcriptase enzyme, it is converted into HIV RNA. Now this HIV RNA is amplified, means in the laboratory from HIV DNA is produced more and more, that is amplified. So below you can see the HIV gene. Okay, in the next slide things will be clearer to you. Next slide, please. Yes. Okay, HIV gene, which is a DNA sequencing, there you can see a polypeptide. I am talking about DNA, and there you see a polypeptide. So is there a question now? When I say DNA sequence, what we have learned about DNA is made up of 4 nucleotides, AUGC, if you remember, biochemistry first year MBBS. So AUGC, and in case of RNA, it is AU thymine, ATGC, and in case of RNA, that's thymine becomes uracil. Okay, so it's a DNA sequence and polypeptide. How are these two related? Okay, so let me tell you. So polypeptide chain, and now what is polypeptide? Okay, so we all know that all these 3 enzymes, which I'm talking about, the reverse transcriptase enzyme, integrase, and proteases. All these enzymes are protein in nature. Proteins are basically the polypeptide chains, which is made up of amino acids. So this every round here in the polypeptide chain represents an amino acid. So we understand that there are 20 amino acids present, and those 20 in different combinations, they form a chain, and that is called as polypeptide chains. Depending upon their sequence and number, those are named as different amino acid. For an example, in our case, that those are different enzymes and other proteins in body. But in case of HIV, this polypeptides signify 3 enzymes. Now, we also understand that each amino acid is coded on codon. Codon, you remember the 3 nucleotide sequence? We call it as codon. So we can see where the M is, M. Above that, you see there are 3 codons, which are actually signifying methionine, that's amino acid. Got it? Okay. So hence these amino acids basically are coded on codons, and codons are basically the nucleotides which are the part of DNA sequence. Just to simplify the process, in front of DNA sequence they have shown the chain of codon, and that codon is representing amino acid which is a part of polypeptide chain, and there are 3 polypeptides in uh, viral structure. So these are the 3 enzymes. Okay, now particularly focus your attention to the M, so which is amino acid position 184. When I say that there is a polypeptide chain, there can be n number of amino acids present in the structure. So here in this particular case, you see that at position number, amino acid position number in this particular polypeptide 184, there is M, which is a methionine, and that is how your wild type of virus is coded. Now what happens? Next slide, please. Okay, can you see that M has gone and V has come? Why has that happened? Now trace back to the codon. The codon is changed. The codon has changed. So why this codon has changed? I told you there can be some defects while making viral copies because they are producing in a mass quantity. So something or other can may get wrong. That is what we call it as mistakes. We call it as mutations. Okay. So this mutation is, because of this mutation, the original M, which was a part of wild virus, is now has become resistant, and that is replaced by V, that is valine. So how is it represented? Next slide, please. So this is all occurring at amino acid position number 184. M is replaced by V. So this is represented as M184V. Next slide. Next slide. Interpretation of genotyping. Okay, so this we talked about M184V. That simply means the amino acid number 184 in the position of polypeptide chain, the methionine is replaced by valine. Okay, got it? So your wild virus now has become a mutant virus, and that polypeptide chain was actually your reverse transcriptase. That polypeptide chain was reverse transcriptase. I mean, the virus was producing that enzyme, and while producing that enzyme, this error had occurred, and because of that, we now have next slide, please. We now have a mutant or resistant virus. So how to interpret that? Although I understand that the kind of report we get from genotyping or the resistant testing, they give us a clear-cut understanding of which drug the virus is sensitive for which drug, and the virus is resistant for which drug. So that is clearly mentioned in that. But again, so to understand it clearly and to play around with the different mutations which we are going to talk about, you can go and refer this site of Stanford HIV drug resistant database. So it is an explicit site wherein you can see the different permutations and combinations where you, next slide please. So here you can put in, if you see the boxes, there is reverse transcriptase, there is protease and integrase. Can you see that one in maroon lines? So reverse transcriptase, protease and integrases. So select the mutation type. So you can go at 184 number. There you can click the original M was replaced with V, and then you get the information on it. So what kind of information, whether it is highly resistant or low resistance and the other details. In spite of that, even if you get an information that a drug is resistant, so that doesn't mean we exclude that drug completely from the therapy. There are certain exceptions to this that we are going to talk about. Okay, so but remember that it doesn't necessarily mean that one has to exclude the drug even if you get the report as highly resistant. Okay, next slide, please. So please go on this slide, sorry, get this site, and there keep adding different mutations and try to get the report. That means you don't have to be dependent on the institutions which are providing the reports, but you can do it by your own when you see the resistant uh, mutation. Okay, so management of resistance. Next slide. Obtain baseline genotype. Unfortunately, in our setup, we do not do much of genotype, but whenever in private setup or whenever it is called for, whenever you get the report, try to keep it in the records and understand what was there on the baseline, whether then go with the easy to take, well tolerated regimens, emphasize adherence to the patient, make them understand that since you are resistant to certain drugs, so those cannot be given to you. There are very few options remain for you. So you need to preserve those and uh, follow and practice adherence perfectly. Include anchor drug with high barrier to resistance. What is anchor drug and what is the backbone drug? If you have gone through my session on introduction to ART, so there it has been very beautifully explained on the canvas what anchor drug and what is backbone drug. So backbone drugs are basically the NRTIs, and to which the anchor drug, the third drug is added, that is called as anchor ones. So, okay, I think we also have 1 or 2 slides on this. Next slide, please. And monitor regularly. Okay, this is important slide, guys. So potency and genetic barrier to resistance. Now here you can see on y-axis, you see the barriers to the resistance. What does that mean? Barrier to the resistance means resistance to the resistance. So the drugs which are having high level of barrier to resistance, that means it is they require n number of many multiple resistance, multiple mutations to occur, then only those drugs will become resistant. For an example, darunavir. Can you see that on the upside, uppermost is actually the darunavir, and next to that is DTG. Yes, next to that is DTG. So you can see that these two drugs have the very high barrier to the resistance. That simply means you have to have a lot of mutations to accumulate. And once that happens, then only these drugs will become resistant. Otherwise, come to the down slider, you can see that 3TC and FTC, that is lamivudine and emtricitabine. You can see that those two drugs have very low resistance to barrier, very low barrier to resistance. So that means, so they are the first one to become resistant, lamivudine and emtricitabine. So they again, you can see those in pairs. Huh? So this 3TC and the FTC, they are in pair because they have kind of cross resistance. They share common mutation. So that's why if that mutation occurs, the 3TC cannot, if the 3TC cannot be given, then emtricitabine can also be not given. Okay. So even nevirapine has a low barrier to resistance. Thoda sa upar we can find that zidovudine and staudin. So again, zidovudine and staudin is a pair. So there is again a cross resistance in their case as well. So and they share also a mutant together. So that's why if a virus is resistant to zidovudine, then again the virus is resistant to staudin as well. So tenofovir is also a drug where the barrier to resistance is not very high. Same is the case with abacavir. And there are other drugs which we may not be interested much. Now, yes, very important concept, potency. Potency is such a highly misunderstood concept in Indian scenario, or not only Indian, in the scientific scenario everywhere. People somehow get confused between the potency and efficacy. So efficacy is how effective your drug is. So, and potency is only about dose of the drug. Potency does not signify if the drug is working fine or it is not working, or it is active or not active. Potency is not about that. Potency is only and only about the dose of the drug. Being a pharmacologist myself, it becomes very painful for me to see when people refer potency as efficacy. Okay, so what does that mean? If something uh, is very potent, when I say that something is highly potent, that simply means a very low dose of that drug is actually brings about the pharmacological action. So, and if I say this is it's not a potent drug, that means you have to use a lot of drugs. I mean, the dose is so high to get the similar pharmacological action. Okay, so when we say something is very potent, that simply means in a low dose that is giving you the action, and that also have implies to the fact that it would give the less number of adverse effects, or whatever complication come, the baggage of complications and adverse effects and other interactions come along with a drug, that simply minimizes. Again, the highly potent drugs are the same, your DTG and darunavir. Okay, so from this slide we can understand that darunavir and DTG are these two are the drugs where they have the high barrier to the resistance, and also they are very potent, highly potent. Okay, so this slide explains it very beautifully. Next slide, please. So whenever you get time, again, you go into the detail of the slide. Now, I mentioned about backbone NRTI medications. So let us try to understand. In the backbone, we have seen that zidovudine and staudine, tenofovir, didenosine, abacavir, 3-TC, and FTC. So these are the drugs which are basically act as a backbone, NRTI. For an example, if we are talking about ZLE, so your Z and L is NRTI backbone, to which anchor is added. Anchor is your efavirenz. Okay, TLD. So tenofovir and lamivudine are your backbone, and D becomes your anchor drug. Got it? So here you can see that these they are lying in the left lower corner. That means there is a low barrier to resistance, and that simply means they can very easily become resistant even to the less number of mutations, or even the 3-TC and FTC becomes resistant to only one number of mutation, and they are less potent as well. That means you have to use a large dose to get the desired pharmacological action. Next slide, please. Now, let us talk about anchor drugs. So the barrier to resistance and potency, both these parameters are better in case of your anchor drugs. And that is the reason why these two are combined together, the anchor drugs as well as your backbone. So here you can see that all these anchor drugs, they have better potency, and some of them are also having high resistance to barrier. But here you can see efavirenz has a low barrier. So one of the reasons why we are on TLD transition, and why this is highly recommended, this again one of the reason you can point out that in your slide, DTG has a high barrier to resistance while efavirenz has a low barrier to resistance. Next slide, please. NRTI resistance. Now we will talk about backbone NRTI. So here an example is given. So what impact does M184V? So you remember reverse transcriptase I talked about? We showed you that methionine is replaced at position number 184 by valine. So that was a reverse transcriptase. And here when I say NRTI, in that both are included, NRTI and NNRTI. Okay, so what impact does, we'll not go into the question. Next slide, please. Okay, so you can see the central line, and here on left side, the more you go on left, the level of resistance increases, and more you go on right, the susceptibility increases. So these are the NRTIs: tenofovir, zidovudine, abacavir, lamivudine, and emtricitabine. So at present, in this particular example, you can see the all drugs lying in the center. That means they are pretty sensitive, but they have also tendency to go into resistance. So let us see in the next slide, please. Now, what if this M184 mutation occurs when the virus was producing the billions of copies, and a defect occurs, and in that defect particularly, this particular defect occurs, which is a replacement of methionine with valine at 184 position of reverse transcriptase. Now, see, the dynamics has changed. So in the wild virus, everything was in the center. But now with this mutation, you can see that lamivudine and emtricitabine, these are now shifted to the resistant zone. And even abacavir tilted little to the resistant zone. But have you observed tenofovir and zidovudine? They both have shifted little to increased susceptibility zone. This is the point I wanted you to understand when I said that, when I was explaining the Stanford website, where the database where you can enter the mutations and get the reports. Even if you get the report that when you enter M184V in the database under new reverse transcriptase, and you get the report that highly resistant to lamivudine and emtricitabine. So in spite of you getting a report of lamivudine being resistant, you do not exclude lamivudine from the treatment. That is what I was trying to tell you there. So why? Because the resistant mutant, this particular guy 184V, actually helps to improve the susceptibility to tenofovir and zidovudine. So someone was referring it as it decreases viral fitness. This particular mutation which occurs in the body of that virus, this decreases viral fitness. Although your lamivudine is not working, but resistant to lamivudine implies to the fact that your tenofovir and zidovudine becoming more susceptible. Did you get my point? When we say something, a defect is occurring, an error is occurring, yes, your drugs are becoming resistant, but something unusual is happening in the viral body, right? So that, and because of here, the unusual thing is expressed in the form of increased susceptibility to tenofovir and zidovudine. Did you get this? Okay, next slide, please. Now talking about thymidine analog mutation, TAMS, generally referred as TAMS. So zidovudine and staudine. So these are the number of TAMS, this thymidine analog mutations. This you can go through. Next slide, please. Okay. So remember, I rather would want you to take a note of M184V represents zidovudine and M184V represents lamivudine and emtricitabine. TAMS represent resistance to zidovudine and staudine. Zidovudine and staudine. Okay, next slide, please. So wild type HIV1, this is the basic. So where we talked about NRTI. Next slide, please. Okay, what if you have the combination? Okay, I didn't talk about recombination. So what happens sometimes? So these defects, when these occur, for an example, the defect had occurred in reverse transcriptase, and also the other type of defect occur in reverse transcriptase in the form of TAMS, and one occurred as M184V. So when this resistant strains together, they infect a cell, CD4 cell, then the progeny generated it as recombinant. They are highly resistant, recombinant form. Okay, so I had forgotten that to mention there. Okay, now come to this example where this both TAMS is also there. So TAMS means your zidovudine, staudine, and M84V is also there. That means your lamivudine emtricitabine. So when these two occur, you can see that everything is the entire thing which was in the center, the all NRTI has now shifted to resistance side. So when these two are together, none of your NRTI would work. At least the case which I shared previously, there you know that even the lamivudine emtricitabine are resistant, that actually strengthens your tenofovir zidovudine. But here, if these two are together, the TAMS as well as 184V, M184V, then everything become resistant. Next slide. We are running against the time. Okay. So the resistance pathway we had seen till now lamivudine emtricitabine, zidovudine, staudine. Now let us talk about tenofovir. This is important for us. Okay, so as I mentioned to you, and also we have seen in that potency and resistance to barrier to resistance wala slide, there we had seen that the first one to become resistant is your lamivudine emtricitabine. Okay, because they have the lowest. So anytime, remember, whenever lamivudine is there in the therapy, in the regimen, the first drug to become resistant is your lamivudine with M184V. You can take a note of it, you can write it, you can remember it. Okay, so once your lamivudine goes out of picture, the next resistance happens, that is related to tenofovir and tenofovir, which is K65R. Again, take a note of it. We already have noted two. Now K65R is for tenofovir. Yes. So you had given this tenofovir emtricitabine regimen. Because of emtricitabine there in the picture, the 184V has developed, and so with that your emtricitabine has become resistant, and for tenofovir K65R resistance developed. Next slide, please. So K65R denotes tenofovir. What if the single K65R developed? So in that case, you can see the zidovudine is going to the moving towards susceptibility side. This is the reason. This is the reason why whenever T is resistant, the replacement or the replacement therapy what we give in second line comes with zidovudine. If hemoglobin is more than 9, of course, to keep that thing aside for this particular slide. Right, tenofovir is now towards high level of resistance, and you can see zidovudine has shifted towards the increased susceptibility. This is the reason why with the occurrence of K65R, when you see in your report, so tenofovir goes out of the picture and zidovudine comes in. Next slide. Okay, what if T and L both become resistant? What if the for L it is 184V and tenofovir 165R had occurred? Then you can see zidovudine is actually moving more and more towards increased susceptibility. Got it? Next slide, please. Now coming to the NNRTI resistance. Next, please. Okay, in NNRTI resistance, the important one is K103N. Most important for efavirenz. Efavirenz. You can take a note of it. K103N, important for efavirenz and nevirapine. Efavirenz and nevirapine, but this may not be the resistant for etravirenz and rilpivirine. These are the another NNRTI. We do not use it, so we will not talk about it much. Next slide. Okay. So this is wild type where you can see all the NNRTI. Next slide. Now K103N has occurred. I told you. So your efavirenz and nevirapine, they are resistant now. Please take a note of this K103N that represent resistance to efavirenz and nevirapine. So now these two have become resistant. Next slide. Yes, these are for rilpivirine. We are not concerned more. Next slide, please. This is important. Again, take a note of it. Y181C. When you find this particular mutation in your patient in the report, then that means the entire NNRTI group is resistant. Everyone in the group, like nevirapine, efavirenz, etravirin, rilpivirine, everyone is now resistant. Next slide. So Y181C is where you need to stop giving NNRTI. Okay, this treatment failure, this we are aware of this. We have seen that virologic failure, where it is not under suppression, CD4 count when comes down, we call it as immunological failure. And when different opportunistic infections occur and the clinical deterioration is there, we call it as clinical failure. Next slide, please. Okay, we know that what substitution is. And I think I have missed on a slide where they talk about one more okay, K65R. When I say one slide is missing, I guess. So when I say K65R, you know that that is a resistant mutant for tenofovir. But remember, whenever there is a resistance to tenofovir in the form of K65R, the ABC, that is abacavir, automatically becomes resistant because of development of cross resistance. Okay, so whenever tenofovir is resistant, we do not give abacavir in the absence of genotyping report. In the absence of genotyping report, of course. So the resistant strain or the resistant mutant for abacavir is L74V. L74V. Did you get it? Okay. So this thing is important. When K65R occurs, that is tenofovir becomes resistant. And once the tenofovir is resistant, you cannot give the ABC. Now there is difference between substitution and switch. So substitution is where you replace the single drug, maybe because of some toxicity or maybe because of drug-drug interactions. So you know that with tenofovir, the most commonly spoken about adverse reaction is renal toxicity. So in case of renal toxicity, we substitute the T with abacavir, right? That is called a substitution, not on the basis of genotyping or not because of resistance, but we simply substituted one drug from the other from the similar class. Okay, so we remove the offending drug and substitute with the drug from the similar class. Now when we call switch, switch is where when the one regimen fails, the other we go to the next regimen in the sequence, rational sequencing, and that is called as switch. When first line ART fails, we switch the patient to second line ART. Got it? Next, please. Okay, so I'll quickly go through it. So high index of suspicion of treatment failure. So when to suspect the patient might be failing the treatment when the patient is on ART, first line ART beyond 6 months. Remember, the 6 months criteria is important. So we do not talk about failure until and unless patient has completed 6 months of therapy on that particular regimen. So if there is occurrence of new opportunistic infection or there is recurrence of opportunistic infection and there is progressive decrease in CD4 count, the clinical improvement is occurring at a very slow pace. Good immunological response is defined as increase of at least 50 CD4 cells after 6 months of ART. Then only we call it as good immunological response. If that is not occurring, then probably we will have to raise an alert. Next. Okay, we do the clinical monitoring on the basis this here the example is given. So use T staging for the clinical event monitoring when the patient is on ART. So on the all the visits, body weight is to be done. We know why we do body weight for tenofovir and DTJ. So if the person is in a stage 4, so first treat his OIs, oral thrush, chronic diarrhea, PCP, and prepare the patient for ART and start the first line ART. So here we are talking about naive patient. Then second visit, you see the improvement in his weight. His OIs have improved previous OIs, but developed new OI in the form of herpes zoster. So we call it as T2. You continue ART and treat the opportunistic infection. So now the weight is also improving and symptoms are also improving. The patient goes in T1. So this is how you monitor the patient on ART. Next, please. Yes, viral load monitoring is important. In we do it yearly after 6 months and a yearly basis later on. In case of HIV-1 infection and HIV-1 and HIV-2 co-infection. But in case of pure HIV-2 infection, we do not do viral load. We only monitor the patient with CD4. Next, this is important point. Next. So I think we all know this. So defining various failures. So to label failure, the criteria number 1, patient has to be on ART for more than 6 months, number 1. Number 2, his adherence rate is more than 95% for 3 consecutive months, each month actually, for 3 consecutive months. That means patient is super adherent to the treatment. And so in that case, you might think of, considering the virological failure if the viral load is more than 1000 copies, immunological failure out of 3 if 1 is the case when the fall of CD4 count pre-therapy, the fall of CD4 count comes to the pre-therapy level. Criteria number 2, if the 50% fall from the on treatment peak value, persistent CD4 levels below 100 cells per mm cube, even after 12 months of therapy. So then if out of these 3, any one is occurring, you would label it as immunological failure. The important criteria I already have told you, the 95% adherence, more than 6 months of therapy. Clinical failure, new or recurrent clinical event or stage 4 is occurring. Next, please. We know this definitions. Next, please. Okay, steps in initiating second line ART. Now the person is on first line ART and you think that after going through the different criteria of failures, immunological, virological, and clinical failure, now you have raised an alert and you thinking in a direction of starting second line ART. So in that case, first define treatment failure. Define treatment failure by virologic testing. So confirm adherence to treatment is adequate, counsel the person and support. Now step 2, decide on NRTI component of the second line regimen. NRTI component, which is a backbone. If lamivudine will be there, lamivudine has to be there, okay? Irrespective of, it was a part of first line therapy, or you found the resistant mutant against it, irrespective of that fact, you would continue lamivudine in the second line as well. But important is, you remember I talked about it, if zidovudine is was there in the first line, you would think of giving TDF in second line. If tenofovir was there in first line, you would think of giving zidovudine in the second line. So zidovudine will be replaced with tenofovir, and similarly tenofovir will be switched to zidovudine. Okay, lamivudine would be the part of. The step 3, decide on PI component if you think of giving that in a second regimen. So you will have to go only for the boosted PI. right? The patient's agreement, counseling, etc. Next slide, please. So these are the 4 steps where you have evaluated the patients. Then you decided on NRTI component. You know that lamivudine has to be there. Then you decided upon the PI component. You gave the boosted PI and counseled the patient for adherence. Yes, these are the second line regimens. So in the first column, you see the first line ART. Second, the suspected failure. The new second line ART you are planning with the remark. Okay. So when a first line ART was zidovudine containing and you think that, for an example, if it's ZLE, you think that NNRTI, or if it was containing PI, if the NNRTI or PI has failed, then you would give TLD, the second line. We will now only talk about in terms of dolutegravir because that is what current recommendations are. So patients are to be initiated, switched, substituted on dolutegravir based regimen. So everything is coming through that context. Okay, if you think your tenofovir is contraindicated, for an example, patient is having renal toxicity, then replace tenofovir with abacavir. And even if there are the weight scenario, the certain weight criteria, then use ABC. Okay. Now the first line therapy is containing tenofovir, abacavir, and you think that NNRTI or a PI based regimen is something which you suspect which has failed, then go for ZLD. So zidovudine, if of course the hemoglobin, if it is more than 9, and if it is less than 9, then you you give dolutegravir plus boosted lopinavir. Okay, now coming to TLD, the TLD, and in TLD, if you think that D is the factor which you suspect which has failed, dolutegravir, then you go with ZL plus ritonavir boosted atazanavir. Of course, if the hemoglobin is more than 9, and if it is less than 9, then you give dolutegravir BD plus ritonavir boosted lopinavir. Okay, ZLD. If your first line is ZLD and if D has failed, then you go with TL plus boosted atazanavir. If multi-NRTI exposed patient is there as a first line, so in the second line, you would give dolutegravir plus boosted lopinavir. And if you think the PI based has failed in the first line, then you will give the dolutegravir plus boosted darunavir. Okay. So a note is there, any PLHIV co-infected with tuberculosis receives double dose of dolutegravir after 12 hours. So we give the fixed dose combination of TLD or whatever the patient is on, and after 12 hours we repeat the dose, 50 milligram dolutegravir we give additionally after 12 hours. Okay, so any PLHIV co-infected with hepatitis B will receive additional TL. Okay, next slide please. So more is coming on that, that's why I'm hurrying up. So second line ART for PLHIV when NNRTI based first line ART has failed. Now how to shift such patients on DTG based regimen? Guys, this is important for us. Okay, the first line was ZLN or ZLE and the first line has failed. Now which DTG based regimen is to be given as a second line? So that will be TLD. And we know that because of weight issues or renal issues, if tenofovir is not to be given, then we give abacavir. So that would become then abacavir L and D. Okay, if the first line regimen is TLE or TLN or TLE or ALN, ALE or ALN, and hemoglobin, if it is more than 9, then you give ZLD. Okay, so if T containing regimen has failed, then you give Z containing regimen with dolutegravir. And with the same scenario, if hemoglobin is less than 9, you will give dolutegravir plus ritonavir boosted lopinavir. Right? Whenever the D is there, your disclaimer is going to be same. If patient is having tuberculosis and rifampicin containing ATT, then increase the dose, give additional 50 mg dose 12 hours apart. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, okay. So, I think, yeah. So, second line ART for PLHIV where PI based regimen is failed, PI based. So, if your first line is ZL plus lopinavir ritonavir or SL plus lopinavir ritonavir, then simply you would go for TLD, and if T is not given, then abacavir. Again, if your TL plus lopinavir ritonavir or AL plus lopinavir ritonavir, then you would give zidovudine based ZLD, which is more if count is more than 9 hemoglobin. And if it is less than 9, then again you would give DTG based DTG plus darunavir ritonavir BID. So this is important point to note here. The first line was containing PI that has failed. You would again give PI in the second line, but as BID with darunavir. You remember darunavir we had seen at the uppermost corner, upper right corner, yeah? Highly potent and high barrier to resistance. So darunavir, ritonavir, we will give BID and DTG, OD. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, I think it has got disconnected. Okay, so this we have seen if the PI based has failed. Now, second line ART for PLHIV with history of multiple NRT exposures in the first line. So when there are multiple exposures, you would give lopinavir, ritonavir plus dolutegravir. And if what happened? Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay,
I
yeah.
had a disconnect.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. So next slide, please, Shweta. Okay, so we were on this slide. So PI based first line with history of multiple NRT exposure. Then C, here you are giving DTG OD and darunavir ritonavir BID. So in both the cases, you can see that the PI is given, but if you also the point to be remember, important point this is, but if you have PI in your first line therapy, so you would again give PI in your second line therapy, but this time you would make it BID. And the PI, the major PI would be darunavir. Right? Yes. Next slide. So in second line ERT for PLHIV, where integrase inhibitor, your dolutegravir, if is the drug which has failed, if the patient is on TLD as a first line therapy, then you would give Zidolam plus boosted atazanavir. Correct? You would give Zidolam plus boosted atazanavir. And if hemoglobin is less than 9, then in place of zidovudine, you would give lopinavir ritonavir, but your DTG would be BID. ये important है. So TLD fails and hemoglobin is good, you will go for Zidolam plus boosted atazanavir. And if hemoglobin is less than 9, you would give DTG twice plus boosted lopinavir. And if the failing regimen is ZLD, then you would again give Z ki jagah, you would give TL plus boosted atazanavir. Correct? Yes, next slide. Counseling issue, I'm not going to go in details of this. You know that when patient is on atazanavir, there can be yellow eyes because of unconjugated jaundice. So this is not necessarily because of hepatocellular injury or injury to liver, only because of unconjugated jaundice. And generally you counsel the patient, but it is again a good idea to keep a watch on the other parameters of liver and counsel the patient. Next, please. So atazanavir is not to be used in pregnant women. Monitoring and follow-up. So in every visit, you would look for body weight. I told you the reason. Treatment adherence is at most important, especially if the patient is to be shifted on the next line of management. Clinical monitoring for OIs, the 4S screening. This is the basic. I think we all know that. So the difference between viral load monitoring in first and second line is, in first line, after 6 months, we keep on doing it every 6 months, the yearly. But in second line, we do it every 6 months. Okay, next slide, please. This you can go through, because on second line laboratory, we every month we need to go for hemoglobin and CBC. The LFT would be every 3 months. The renal function test every 3 months. Fasting blood glucose after a year. Then yearly. Lipid profile yearly. Then we viral load we go do every 6 months, and same is CD for every 6 months. Next slide, please. This is especially relevant in cases of children. So if the age of the patient is more than 5 years and the CD4 count stays above 350 cells and viral load is undetectable or less than 1000 copies, in that case, you might take a call to stop the CD4 monitoring 6 monthly basis. Next, please. Okay, management of toxicities. Quickly, I'll take you through dyslipidemia or lipodystrophy. Then you would advise patient to work out and go for a pharmacological options. Rise in transaminase, in that case, you would look for HbSAg, anti-HCV and monitor it. Hyperglycemia, you would advise on workout, diet control and the drugs. If in case of hemophilia is deficiency of factor 8A. In that case, probably you would have to go for a frequent blood transfusions. Osteoporosis and avascular necrosis, then switch to non-PI based regimen. Next, please. Okay, let me see how much time we have in hand. Allow me to exceed by 20 minutes. This is a long topic and please allow me. Yeah, sure. Fatafat, I'll take you through this. Scenario 1, where PLHIV is on PI based. Okay, that we can take later. Next slide, please. We'll complete, and if the time permits, we'll come back to this. Timing chart for routine viral load. We have seen this. Next slide, please. Every 6 months we are doing this. And the step-up counseling, we have spoken in detail in my previous session, where if the viral load is more than 1000 copies, then you conduct a viral load test at scheduled time after 6 months. You give the count, you ask patient to be adherent to the treatment, and as a result, after this intervention, if the viral load is less than 1000 copies, you will continue with the same regimen, whatever regimen is working at present. And if the viral count is more than 1000, you give counseling, the advanced package, step-up counseling, and person is adherent for if the person is adherent in the last 3 months more than 95%, then you would again repeat the viral load, and this time if the viral load is less than 1000, then you will continue the same regimen. And if it is not, then you would refer the patient to SASIP for further management. Right? Next, please. Third line ART. Yes, this is important. Second line we have seen. So in third line ART, basically it is started at the level of COE or SASEP. So third line ART is basically dolutegravir we give 50 milligram OD. So the difference between third line and when what is that, salvage, the salvage therapy, when the third line fails, the difference between these two is dolutegravir 50 mg is given OD here and dolutegravir is given BD there. Baki, the remaining two, darunavir and ritonavir, they remain the same. And please pay attention here, darunavir is also given BD and ritonavir is also given BD, while dolutegravir is given OD. Again, if dolutegravir OD is given only if the dolutegravir was not the part of your first line or second line. Only then here dolutegravir is given OD. If dolutegravir had been the part of your first line or second line, then you would here give dolutegravir BD, darunavir BD and ritonavir BD. Next slide, please. Okay, if the patients on third line shall be monitored by viral load testing every 6 months after initiation of the third line therapy, and the patient fails on the third line, in that case, you would refer the patient to NASIP and they will manage the patient further based on, probably they will go for the genotyping and see which drugs are available or patient is susceptible to, then those will be included. Next, please. Third line follow-up. So hemoglobin CBC is given, is done at baseline 1 month, 3 months, every 6 months. Then becomes your, okay, this you can go through. So every 6 months important is you are doing your viral load and CD4 count. Next, please. What if your third line fails? In that case, as I mentioned already, you give dolutegravir BD, darunavir and ritonavir BD. Next, please. And again, whatever interventions are to be done, those will be done by NASIP. Now with this, we have completed our topic of resistance. Very quickly, I'll take you through the toxicities of antiretroviral therapy. Next. Next. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. So, yes. So first line ARV drugs toxicity for NRTIs like zidovudine, the NS is nucleoside. So for NRTIs like zidovudine, staudine, lamivudine, the mitochondrial toxicities are important. One should be wary of. That is lactic acidosis, pancreatitis, lipodystrophy, hepatic steatosis, peripheral neuropathy, anemia, and myopathy. While for tenofovir, the important one is nephrotoxicity, and you also need to look and keep monitoring the weight of the patient. Now, NNRTI, which is efavirenz and nevirapine. So, skin rash, hepatitis, CNS manifestations are important to look for. Next, please. Okay, so these are the short-term toxicities, medium-term, and long-term. In case of staudine, we all know the lipodystrophy and dyslipidemia are the long-term ones. Let us keep it aside because staudine has been phased out. Let us talk about zidovudine. So bone marrow suppression and anemia is something important. We should keep watching. Medium term, bone marrow suppression, anemia, lactic acidosis. In lamivudine, skin rash. So lamivudine is one of the least toxic ART, but highly resistant. Next, please. Okay. So in case of abacavir, uh, hypersensitivity can occur and some respiratory symptoms. In case of tenofovir, yes, nephrotoxicity we should be wary of. And okay, next please. Efavirenz, on long term, gynecomastia can occur, but in short term, there are vivid dreams, hepatotoxicity, etc. Although those are rare. Nevirapine, skin rashes, and hepatotoxicity. Next. There could be some overlapping toxicities. For an example, bone marrow suppression majorly is caused by zidovudine, but there are other contributing factors such as cotrimoxazole, dapsone, pyrimethamine, ganciclovir, amphotericin B, and ribavirin. Hepatotoxicity can be caused by many drugs, which is nevirapine, atazanavir, PIs, and ATT. Now, peripheral neuropathy, you know that staudin and isoniazid. Isoniazid is hepatitis uh, is caused by uh, uh, next. Next slide. So the very important thing is, so one should differentiate any new clinical event after initiation of ART from IRIS. So initiation of, once you initiate the patient on ART, remember to rule out IRIS. Rule number 1, rule out IRIS. Next. There are certain hematological toxicities. We know that zidovudine management, also we have fair idea of management. Next, please. We will not go into the details of management. We have very less time in hand. Next slide, please. Yes, GI tolerance and diarrhea we are aware of. Next slide, please. These are usually the self-limiting. Next slide. Okay, acute hepatitis. So monitor serum transaminases and take a call on whether to discontinue or replace, I mean, substitute the drugs. Next slide, please. Again, renal toxicity, we know that monitoring is important and substitution can be sort of. Next slide. Hypersensitivity, yes, we have fair idea that discontinue until the symptoms resolve if it is of grave nature. Next slide. So all this slide you can go through because these are easy to understand and all theory part. And even if we keep on reading out the slides here, that may not have much effect, but the explaining resistance was more important and which we have done already. Next, please. The grades we all know that mild, moderate, severe, potentially life-threatening. We know. Next, please. Yes. Next, please. So these are the skin rashes. So in mild, moderate, severe, you can see the Steven Johnson in the right lower corner. Next. Next. Next, please. Next slide, please. Next. Tenofovir toxicity, I think we all are aware of. Next, please. This we know that, which is next. So one is a prodrug and very next, please. Yes. So creatinine clearance, I don't think we need to go through the formula. We already know this. The Cockcroft and Gold formula. Next, please. Next. Renal dose adjustment, do you want me to go through this? No, I think it is pretty clear, and you are going to get this slides. So if there is any difficulty in this, please contact me. Next slide, please. Next. We have seen the definitions. Next, when to call substitution and when to call switch. Next. Next, please. Okay, wait a minute. Last, the previous slide. Okay, so suggested substitution for zidodin is tenofovir. We already have seen this, and also we know why. And for abacavir, it is tenofovir, and tenofovir again, it is abacavir. So if there is, we are talking about substitution and not switch. Please remember what we have discussed in a previous section. There we talked about switch. That means if zidovudin is resistant, so in a first line, then we had shifted to, we have switched to tenofovir. But here also as a substitution, we can do this. Here I'm talking about substitution. Zidovudin can be substituted with tenofovir, and abacavir can be substituted with tenofovir, and tenofovir can be substituted with abacavir. Next, please. Efavirenz can be substituted with nevirapine in case of CNS side effect if those are very severe in nature. Ritonavir boosted atazanavir in case of grade 4 rashes with efavirenz. Both efavirenz and nevirapine is the culprit drug, then ritonavir boosted atazanavir can be given. Next, please. If atazanavir is intolerant, then you go for lopinavir boosted. If lopinavir is a culprit, then you go for substitute it with atazanavir. If multiple NRTIs, for an example, you cannot give zidovudin, abacavir, and tenofovir because of toxicity or intolerance, then you will go for raltegravir. Next, please. Okay, next, please. Okay, let me talk about this later, because here we are talking about drug-drug interaction. You know, this atazanavir is acidic drug in nature. Acidic, that means it gets absorbed. The drug being acidic in nature, it gets absorbed from the stomach, because in the stomach we have acidic environment. So whichever drug is playing or trying to alter the acidic environment in the stomach would have effect on atazanavir's absorption. So that is why antacids are advised to take 2 hours before or after. Atazanavir is to be taken 2 hours before or after the administration of antacid. The reason to it, you know that. So antacid being alkaline in nature, it alters the acidic environment in the stomach, and that is why if atazanavir is given in immediate succession, then the absorption of atazanavir will be affected almost by 20%. Same is the case with ranitidine, cimetidine, etc., which are the H2 receptor antagonists. They reduce the acid secretion and thereby affecting the absorption of atazanavir. So it is the patient, if the patient is ART naive, then you can give famotidine 40 mg. But if the patient is ART experienced, then you shouldn't exceed the dose of famotidine more than 20 mg. Now PPIs. So PPIs should be administered. Don't get confused between PPIs and PIs. So PPIs is proton pump inhibitor, and this thing omeprazole, lansoprazole, etc. And PIs are your protease inhibitors. So PPIs should be administered at least 12 hours before the PIs. Why? Because we know that PPIs, they irreversibly block the hydrogen potassium ATPase pump, and thereby affecting the secretion of acid. So hence it is recommended that there should be a gap of 12 hours. And if the patient is PI experienced, that means the patient has already in some point of time consumed PI, then PPIs are not recommended at all, contraindicated. And in naive patient, dose of PPI shouldn't be exceeding 20 mg in case of omeprazole. Yes, next please. Okay, this although we have spoken about, so it is important, DTG is important for us. So let me spend a minute over here. Next slide, Shweta. So we are aware of the Botswana report where they have, next slide, Shweta, please. So in that, we know that some cases of neural tube defects to the child when the pregnant women consumed a DTG based regimen was noted in Botswana study. Shweta, next slide. So what is our take now? With the subsequent studies and research, we have realized that the kind of and the incidence of the neural tube defect was similar to the other ARTs given, and that is why it was recommended by the WHO that if the woman is pregnant then and already on DTG based regimen, I'm explaining this part because very frequently I get these questions from ART centers. They call me and they ask about the woman is pregnant, is in her first trimester or maybe in her second or third month, and she is already on DTG based regimen, what to do? So answer to that question is if the woman is already on DTG based regimen and by the time her pregnancy is detected, she already has completed her 4 weeks because the pregnancy is detected at 6 weeks of 6 weeks from LMP. So in that case, there is no need to uh, stop DTG based regimen or change to any other regimen. The simple reason is the neural tube closes at 4 weeks. So there is no use. By the time she is diagnosed, she is detected with pregnancy, the neural tube is already closed. The first and second thing is DTG is found to be, there are various other advantages we had seen in the last presentation of mine where we have seen there is a faster suppression of viruses. First, there is higher barrier to resistance and it is more effective and comparatively well tolerated and safer. So this is the reason why it is not advised to change the regimen. And what maximum, next slide, Shweta, please. So what maximum we can do is, so in a women with childbearing age group, in all those women, we can give a fair idea of the research, whatever has happened, and also the outcomes of the subsequent research. And we can give her we can leave the ball in her court, letting her take a call on this, whether she want to be on DTG based regimen or not. Next slide, please. So next, we are almost at the end of the presentation. We know this. Next slide. We have been doing the monitoring, so we are quite aware of this. Yes, important drug-drug interaction. You can go through by yourself. Next, please. This we have spoken. Atazanavir-induced unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. We know this. This is not associated with hepatocellular injury. Next, please. So even if that happens, we need to, keep an watch on if the jaundice is not a result of another hepatocellular injury because of toxicity, drug toxicity, or any subsequent infection with hepatitis B or C. Yes, so we are at the end of the session where key points were counsel patients on common toxicities, make patient aware of, and keep monitoring patient, the improvement, the goals we had discussed in last session. So keep an eye on that. Keep assessing the toxicities time and again, but always keep in mind that iris needs to be ruled out. Management of toxicity and substitution therapy should be based on the established guidelines, NACO guidelines, and the cases are to be, which cases are to be referred to SASEP and NASEP that we have seen already. Next slide. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. So you can unmute yourself if you have queries.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you to everyone for patient listening. You can now unmute yourself and ask questions.
So lamivudine, one knows that lamivudine is the drug which is highly, it can become resistant very quickly, but still we keep
Yes.
it in the regimen in
Yes,
spite of knowing
yes.
that there is resistance. So why we, what is the reason
Yes,
there?
I told you that the mutant which was M184V, so which was the resistant mutation for lamivudine. So what happens? Although this drug, now the lamivudine will not work for you, but that decreases the viral fitness. So viral is less fit now, and that is why your zidovudine is more towards susceptibility side. So your virus becomes more susceptible to zidovudine, right? Antinofovir. That is the reason why it is maintained in the second line regimen as well.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So as I explained to you, when a defect happens, the defect also happens to the viral body. Not only our drug becomes resistant, but the defect also hampers the viral body. And here you have seen that it is making the other drugs more potent.
Okay.
Yes. My sincere apologies for exceeding the time by 17 minutes. But in spite of that, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. I would like to answer those questions. Even you can inform those questions on WhatsApp or email of mine.
Ma'am, I don't think there are any questions. Participants, please feel free to put your questions on the WhatsApp group also. I think we can end the session now. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you guys
Yeah, stay
for
safe.
patient
Thank you,
listening
ma'am.
me. Yeah, stay safe. Bye. Take care.